I can hear you. I have those good ears. All right. I guess we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. I see that you all knew that I was giving a short little welcome, so you all sat as far away as possible, but thank you. Welcome to the IMSA Innovation Showcase Keynote Address. Today marks the first innovation showcase for the IMSA community. This is an opportunity for the youth and faculty and staff to come together and share all the good work and celebrate what they're doing with you and the community and the world. I'm Storm Robinson. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Teaching and Learning. And on behalf of our President, Dr. Jose Torres, and the Principal, Dr. Robert Hernandez, who is sitting right there, wave your hand, please. Thank you. I'd like to give you a warm welcome to our first Innovation Showcase. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now, as I'm sure you will agree that it's a great success to see so many great projects, technologies, programs on Showcase inside of the Center for Inquiry and Innovation tonight. Can I ask that you just give one more round of applause to all of those presenters and people who've put on a lot of work together to put those things together. We are honored here tonight to have a special guest with us, Betsey Ziegler, CEO of 1871, who will share a few words about her work and from some of her perspective of leading one of the world's richest leading technology incubators for digital startups. To introduce our special guest, I'd like to hand it off to Senior Aliyah de Guzman. Aliyah is the Board President and CEO for Talent for the academic year of 2018-2019. Please give her a round of applause, too. Let me tell you what this lady has the responsibility of doing. She has the responsibility for leading a team of students to create events and experiences that inspire entrepreneurial and innovative thinking among sophomore, junior, and senior students alike at IMSA. In her role as CEO of Talent, Aliyah has worked to coordinate the program's weekly Monday Night Incorporated Cafe, develop event content, ideate event experiences, train facilitators, managing the programs, boards, and volunteers. It's a lot of work to do. Wow. In this capacity, she has reached out to and collaborated with other student clubs and groups on campus, student leaders, external speakers, and curated a year's worth of programs and events with her team. Aliyah is an excellent champion of IMSA leadership, innovative and entrepreneurial thinking. Please join me in welcoming Aliyah to the stage, to the podium, to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. Welcome, Aliyah.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Mr. Robinson. So being part of Talent, serving as its CEO, is one of the best things I ever did at IMSA. So Talent's actually the one that sparked my passion in entrepreneurship, and it's our mission to spark that same interest to our students. And so it is an honor to have Betsey Ziegler, the first female CEO of 1871, now the #1 ranked university-affiliated tech incubator in the world, to come speak today. So previous to 1871, Betsey was a Chief Innovation Officer at the Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University. From 2011 through September 2015, she served as Associate Dean of Degree Programs and Dean of Students. And prior to Kellogg, she served as principal at McKinsey & Company's Chicago office, which is a consulting firm. And Ziegler holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and received a BA in economics from Ohio State University. She's also a member of Anne and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital, Chicago, and the Museum of Science and Industry Board of Directors, an advisor and investor in many young technology companies. So let's give it up for Betsey.
All right, thank you very much. Am I too loud? Am I okay? Good? All right. So it's an honor to be here tonight, a pleasure. I've never been to the IMSA campus before, but I've been a fan from afar for a long period of time, and I am the mom of a 6-year-old son and aspire for him one day to be talented enough to be admitted to this program. I had a phenomenal time going and looking at the student projects, totally amazing, so much entrepreneurial talent here that I am looking forward to having you one day be members at 1871. And there's one company, Fusion. Where's the team? Is that here? Over there. Right. So I've been waiting to get my glasses redone for over a year because I'm too lazy and too cheap, and now they've got a sticker that can help me fix that really fast. So I think the big takeaway from my lovely introduction is that 8 years ago I was a partner serving insurance companies. So I spent all my time with insurance companies, and now I lead the world's leading tech hub. So at least on paper, I'm way cooler now than I was before. So I guess one thought about kind of the IMSA experience from my perspective, which is that I think the best gift that we can give one another, the most important gift, is showing people what their real options are and opening up the world to what could be, even if you've never seen anybody do that before. And I think that IMSA does this day in and day out, and that's something that the school should be extremely proud of, that the students here are all extraordinarily talented. And then when you put them in this learning environment, there's really no upward bound on what they can accomplish. And I'm proud just being in the room with all of you guys. So I want to do 3 things today. The first is very briefly tell you a little bit about myself, to share what I think this kind of the shape of the world is right now, including a quick deep dive on Chicago tech, because I think one of my obligations in my role is to make sure that audiences leave with 2 or 3 new pieces of information about what's happening in tech in Chicago that they can then share to other people, because it's a story that almost nobody understands. And then the third, close with, frankly, what I'm calling kind of a gauntlet for the students here. I'm going to throw a gauntlet at you of sort of my expectations of you as you navigate your final years of high school, and certainly as you go on to explore other parts of your future. So the only other thing that I'm going to add to Aaliyah's introduction of me is sort of context setting. So when I went to college, there was no internet, right? So for the people that are young in this room, can you imagine, right? So I graduated from college in 1993. There was no internet. I didn't know what that. I mean, somebody was building it, but we didn't have access to it yet. And I went to graduate school when you had to call the internet. Have your parents told you about this? Where you had the older people know what I'm talking about, right? Where you had your computer and you plugged it into a phone jack, and you called the internet. And when the internet was busy, which it often was, you were like, "Oh, I'll just have to call back later." Can you imagine, right? How much patience do you have right now if your computer doesn't or your phone doesn't connect immediately? 0, right? So that's the context that I grew up in when I was, older than you, but sort of 20 years ago. That's the context that I grew up in, and now the world is a lot different. And so this is the city of Chicago, of course. Tech is now close to 10% of our economy, up from 2% just 6 years ago. So it's moving fast. We have the highest percentage of female founders of anywhere in the country. Does anyone know what that number is? Take a guess. Say it louder. 20. It's actually 30. The average across the United States is 18. So we're doing really phenomenally well with female founders, although, of course, I'd like that number to be bigger, but relatively speaking, we're doing extremely well. Chicago has the highest investor returns for the 3rd year in a row. 45% of the investments made in the city of Chicago deliver a 10x return. So whether you are an investor or not, if you put in $100 and you get $1,000 out later, that's a good thing, right? We're all happy about that. We have the highest median multiple on invested capital, meaning of all the dollars invested into startups in Chicago, the return of those after the liquidity is the highest of anywhere in the country, including Silicon Valley. We're at 4.6 times. The next closest city is Seattle at 3.8. And then Outside of Silicon Valley, so we're just going to do a thought experiment for about 20 seconds. We're going to pretend for a minute that Silicon Valley doesn't exist. Okay, so we're going to carve it out and we're going to shove it off into the water. And we're going to look at the next 5 cities in terms of exit. So when companies either get bought or go public, that's a liquidity event. And when you look at those, the cities are LA, Chicago, New York, Austin, and Boston. And this is through 2017. I don't have the 2018 data yet. And in Chicago, those are companies like Grubhub and CleverSafe and Groupon and Fieldglass. LA is 20 billion. Excuse me, LA is 30 billion. Chicago is 15. All right? 20 of LA's 30 is Snapchat. So you can see where I'm going? So we're now going to pretend like Snapchat doesn't exist. Okay? And that is the Betsey Ziegler way to make Chicago number 1 on this dimension, is to pretend like these things don't exist. Okay. So Chicago is the 3rd largest GDP in the U.S., and we're the most diverse from a sector perspective. We're the most educated large city in the United States. We have the 2nd highest graduation rate for computer science, so we are the 2nd highest producer of computer science degrees of anywhere in the country, and 24% of those software developers are women, which is way higher than any other city, and we are the most connected city. And so we've got tons going on, and in my opinion, that means that there's something very special happening in Chicago that almost nobody knows about. Right? We do a terrible job telling our story. We're trying to get better at it, but right now we're doing a pretty terrible job. This is 1871, Chicago's central tech address. Who's been to 1871? Okay, the majority of you, fantastic. When we started, our 7-year anniversary is on Thursday. When we started, we were the only place of our kind. Now there are over 100 other organizations that do things similar to us. They're innovation hubs, they're accelerators, they're incubators, they're co-working spaces. I think that's a great thing because it means that there's demand from all over the city for this kind of services. Now, who knows why we're called 1871? Yeah, over here. Great Chicago Fire, all right? So this is the city in Chicago in 1871. Met up with that guy, met up with this guy, burned the city down. Of course, we're not celebrating the fire, right? We're celebrating what happened after the fire and how people from all around the city, all backgrounds, all walks of life, came together to reimagine and rebuild the city of Chicago, and that is the philosophy and ethos that we try to carry with us every day inside my team. 1871 exists to inspire, equip, and support founders from all backgrounds to build great businesses. This is what we're there for every day. This is why, for me, I've got the greatest job in the world, and we'll talk about more of this later, but I get to wake up every day and partner with my team to increase the probability of success of every single founder that's currently there. We currently have 450 companies building at 1871. We have 685 alumni companies that continue to operate and grow in the city of Chicago. Those 685 have created more than 11,500 jobs in the last 7 years and attracted more than $1.4 billion in capital. All right, so what that says to me is that we've got a model that works. And if you think about a timeline of a startup, 7 years is sort of, if you're still alive after 7 years, it means hopefully you're hitting your stride, and we're at 7 years, and so I think that we are now hitting our stride, and now it's our opportunity to replicate and expand. And that means that when we look around the city of Chicago, there's talent and aspiration everywhere, but opportunity and access is not there. And so there's a whole bunch of entrepreneurs that will never come into the walls, through the doors of the Merchandise Mart into 1871. And so my job and my team's job is to figure out how do we partner across the 77 neighborhoods of Chicago to bring 1871 to them without building mini 1871s all over the city, because we don't need that. All right, so William Gibson, who's a famous sci-fi author, says that the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. And Larry Page, founder of Google, says that lots of companies don't succeed over time, and what they fundamentally get wrong is they miss the future. Now, why did they miss the future? They missed the future because not that long ago, when you wanted to figure out what was going to happen next, you looked behind you and you just extrapolated forward. But you can't do that anymore because the pace of change is like this. And today, you might have heard this before, but today is the slowest day you're ever going to have for the rest of your life. Now, that might not mean anything if you're 16, but when you're not 16, when you're my age, that means something really different, right? Every day the pace is going so fast that what got you to this point will not get you to the future. This guy in Kenya has more data and more knowledge on his phone than the President of the United States had 15 years ago. This phone is 1,000 times more powerful than the one that put this guy on the moon. And we carry this in our pocket. And within 5 years, the power of our cell phones is going to be the equivalent of IBM Watson. So all of us will be carrying IBM Watson in our pocket. So what does that mean to you in terms of your ability to communicate, create, produce, consume, connect, right? It's phenomenal what's going to be. 5 years from now, most of you will be somewhere, for those that go to college, will be somewhere in your college time frame or shortly there graduated. I mean, the world is going to look fundamentally different than it does today. These were the 5 biggest companies 50 years ago. This is actually not relevant. This is fixed data. I will show you. This is for the next page. Standard Oil and Kodak are no longer in existence. These are the 5 biggest market caps of today as of the end of February. Amazon, these aren't surprising. Berkshire Hathaway might be the only surprising one. Facebook, Tencent, and Alibaba are 6, 7, 8. These 3 companies got created less than 20 years ago. And Facebook, regardless how you feel about Facebook, whether you're pro-Facebook or against Facebook, they've got 2.3 billion members. The largest countries in the world have, China and India, have 1.4. So from a country perspective, if you thought about a country, they're almost 1 billion people bigger than the biggest countries. The winning business models look nothing like in the past. So who is the biggest media company in the world that does not own any of its own content? Say it louder. Nope. Not YouTube. Not Google. I just said who they were a minute ago. Facebook. All right. What about the biggest storage company in the world that doesn't own any of its own warehouses? It's not Amazon, but I think Amazon's getting close. Where do you store your documents right now? Say it louder. Dropbox. Yep. All right, biggest transportation company in the world that doesn't own any of its own cars, and it's not the U.S. version. Think China. Think China. You know the what? Yes. Who said it? Dee Dee. Is that what you're going to say? All right. Sure. Of course you were, right? All right. What about the biggest music company in the world that doesn't produce any of its own music? Spotify. All right. Largest hospitality company in the world that doesn't own any of its own rooms? Airbnb. All right. So just think about that for a second. And again, context is different given the diversity of experiences that are in this room right now. But those are just 5 companies in their industries that they are the largest in their industry. They don't use any of the same process. They don't own any of the assets. They don't interact with customers in any way, shape, or form similar to the next nearest incumbent. And this is happening in every single industry. So I spend a lot of my time talking to big companies. And we talk about the fact that, if the rate of innovation inside your house isn't faster than the rate of innovation outside of your house, it's a problem. So for a whole bunch of these companies, not these guys, but the guys they're competing against, that's a problem. And every startup I know has big companies as prey on their pitch documents, right? Every big company is being targeted by some small company. This is my rule of thumb, which I just shared, that there's new record in venture capital. So in 2018, it was $130 billion in venture capital, up from just $80 billion in 2017, and global VC funding is up another 20%. As of the end of January, early February, there were 308 unicorns. So these are companies that have a valuation of $1 billion or more. This number is constantly changing. Crowdfunding is likely to hit $300 billion by 2025. I saw that Kickstarter, I think it was either today or yesterday, had their 10-year anniversary. Kickstarter's already had $3 billion pledged across 400,000 projects. And the reason this matters is because as long as you're connected to the internet, no matter where you are in the world, you can be an entrepreneur and you can start a company. And so as I think about all the students in the room, you guys can, the ease of which you can start a company is way different now than it ever was, and you can attract capital as long as you have a connection to the internet. So I normally give this talk over a longer time period, and I go a little bit more in depth in a few what I call gravitational shifts. We're going to kind of fly through 3, and then before I sit down and have a conversation. The first one is the Internet of Everything, okay? So 5G is coming. We keep being told it's coming. In theory, it's coming soon to Chicago. Project Loon is a network of stratospheric balloons. They're currently, this is an Alphabet company. They're currently operating above Puerto Rico and above Kenya, and they're delivering internet connectivity to about 100,000 people. There's a race to get as many satellites up into the atmosphere as possible. OneWeb is launched early this year with close to 900 satellites. SpaceX is putting 12,000 satellites up lower in the orbit to this, and the reason why they're doing that is because of this. So right now we have roughly 7.5 billion people on the planet, and 4 billion have access to the internet. Within a few years, 5 years, we're going to have 8 billion people on the planet, and all 8 billion are going to be connected to the internet, which is basically an addition of close to 4 billion customers. So you aspiring entrepreneurs out there, you're about to double your customer base in the next 5 years. And the way you're going to do that is because of the satellite installations, 5G, the stratospheric balloons, some new cables that are going under the ocean that are going to be able to connect people. And I want you to think about what does that mean in terms of you have 4 billion more people that have access to healthcare, have new needs of infrastructure, have access to new education pieces. The opportunity for them to shift into the middle class is sort of mind-boggling. But this is coming, and I think it's one of the most important things happening, and very few people are talking about it. So for fun, time to reach 1 billion customers, because soon having 1 billion is not going to be that big of a deal. It took McDonald's 23 years, and somebody might debate me on the analysis here, and I'm happy to have that debate of what the denominator is in each of these years, but you're just going to let it roll for right now, okay? So McDonald's 23 years, Uber 5.5, and Gangnam Style. Do we know what Gangnam Style is? Do the young people here know what that is? Yeah, okay. Anyone want to do it? Nobody's going to stand up and do the dance? You were starting to do it. All right, no? All right. So Psy took 180 days. Pokemon Go, Fortnite haven't hit 1 billion yet. So they are surpassed 180 days. So Gangnam Style at the moment has the lead. 5 billion people have a mobile phone. Half of those are smartphones. 4 billion people have a toothbrush. Okay, this is perspective, right? 5 billion people have a phone, and 4 billion people have a toothbrush. We are at the start of the sensor revolution. In the next 2-3 years, 1 trillion connected sensors will populate our world and be in everything we make, including ourselves. So in Sweden, there's a company called Biohacks, and 4,000 residents have implanted microchips in their hands. And they're using it to open doors, literally like open the lock of their house, to pass contact information, to pay for things. Now, by show of hands, how many of you are willing to put a sensor in your hand? Right? Pretty many, okay? 200 billion apps downloaded in 2017. I'm going to pick up the pace because I'm going to run out of, are we like 5 more minutes? Or is that too much? 5? Okay. We know we're spending a lot more time on mobile devices than we used to. We touch our phones more than 2,500 times per day on average. Now, I don't believe this is me, but it could be. And when I say touch, I don't mean put in our pocket. I mean like do something with. Microsoft did this study. We now have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. You can Google it. I don't know how they did it, but they did do it. This is a real sign in a real zoo. All right, so this is really happening. Okay, this is where everything we do is on demand. One of the new big things in China is live streaming your shopping experience. So think Home Shopping Network in the United States. Now you can do it with where there's a person in their home or in the studio, and you're texting with them the whole time, and so it's an interactive social conversation. Everything you do when you're in a retail store gets tracked and mapped, and if you feel like you're being watched, you are. There are augmented reality instruction manuals. This is a new thing called the mirror, which you hang it up in your house, and it looks like a mirror until you turn it on, and then it's live exercise instruction, either live or on-demand stored video, and it gives you feedback. This is a thing you can hold in your pocket for $99. It measures your heart rate and it sends it directly to your doctor. This tracks what you eat and gives feedback. I'm hopeful over time that eventually won't have that, but it is what it is. This is a haptic wallet that knows your budget, and as you go through the month, it gets harder to open. Right? All right, I'm going to skip a few slides because we're going to run out of time. So that's the Internet of Everything. The future of mobility. Uber is going autonomous with almost 25,000 cars starting this year. Following a year ago, they had a tragic accident where a woman got killed in a self-driving car in Phoenix. They fixed that problem, hopefully, and they're going live. Waymo is by far the most advanced in terms of the number of actual road miles as well as simulated miles. This is GM's new car. You notice there are a few things missing. Autonomous car. Right? There are two concepts I want you to think about with mobility. The first is I want you to think about kind of a room with wheels rather than a car. Because if it's autonomous and doesn't need to look like a car, then it's a room, and you can make it an office, you can make it a hotel room, you can make it a game room, you can make it a man cave, you can make it whatever you want, right? And it's going to transport you from place to place. And the second thing I want you to think about is this, which is KYC is know your customer, KYM is know your machine. So I want you to think about that from the perspective of the following, which is, and the technology exists for this to be true. And I read yesterday that it's Jaguar is starting to do this a little bit, but with autonomous transport, blockchain, and cryptocurrency, and artificial intelligence, we are at the stage where if you're driving, so I just drove from the city over here today, right? If I had been running late, the traffic was bad, I could have armed my car to pay other cars to get out of the way. It's coming, right? We can do it today. It's not live in people's cars, right? What's live in people's cars now is you can order Domino's or you can order Starbucks with the press of a button on some of the newest cars, right? But what I just described is technically a reality today, although not being used. But I read yesterday that Jaguar is starting to outfit their cars with cryptocurrency. All right, Ford and Lyft are doing ride-hailing, and self-driving cars are given the green light in Beijing. Flying taxis are going live. Right now they are manned, but soon to be not. And in Miami, they're building high-rise condos for very high price, $5 million each, that have a landing pad for flying cars. And the reason that's happening is because so many more people are moving into the city, and when people moved into the city before, we had to grow up in terms of residential space because we didn't have enough land space, and we don't have room for more cars on the road. So we're either going to have to go up or we're going to have to go down. And down is, I'm not going to play the video, but down is the Boring Company, the Elon Musk company, which you guys can do separately. All right? So I'm going to, we're running out of time, so I'm going to fly past this. I'll just do one quick thing on artificial intelligence, which is, we'll do this one, right? Which is the Chihuahua, which is the muffin. Okay? Sometimes it's a little tricky. I think the thing important about artificial intelligence is many people think, Sundar Pichai from Google in particular thinks that this could be more transformational than the invention of fire on human development. in the next couple of years, it's going to be about a $16 trillion industry, which is more than the combined GDPs of China and India. So when you think about that in terms of the size and scale. And I apologize, I thought I'd get through this faster, and I didn't. But let's talk about what does it all mean. So first it means, so there's, and I'm happy to spend time talking about any of these in our talk, but the pace of change never higher, the level of ambiguity never higher, the level of complexity never higher, but I think it's actually the most amazing time to be alive, and the reason is because the opportunity is boundaryless. There's literally no problem that we can't solve with technology and working together. And what it means from my perspective for you guys is that it needs leaders to focus on problems that actually matter and to fully understand the role that technology plays and to appropriately balance the push and the pull. And we need people with cross-discipline, cross-experience, cross-background to sit on the same side of the table, which we haven't seen a lot of to date. And the last thought that I would leave you with is that if we're not the people that, if in this case Facebook, if his team isn't the folks that create the thing that could kill Facebook, somebody else will. And so that's the orientation that I want the students in the room to be thinking about as you enter the world and start to think about how you want to have impact. And those of you that aren't students, that are leading companies or working in companies, the 7 words of a dying organization are, anyone have a guess? How about we've never done it that way before? Right? All right, so let me pause there and we can engage in conversation. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. All right, all right. Thank you so much for that amazing speech, Betsey. Let's give her another round of applause, please. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with like the very beginning. So my first question is...
My very beginning?
Yes, your very beginning. So my first question is, how did you become interested in business technology?
So I think that when I first graduated from college, I worked at General Electric in an operations role. So I led people in call centers and operations space, and so that got me kind of connected to how do you work with teams of people to get to have big impact and get stuff done. And then when I was working at McKinsey with a lot of my clients, I started to gravitate towards these themes around operations, and often operations and technology go hand in hand. But they weren't the new technologies, they were sort of the basics on how you run an organization. And I don't think it was until I left McKinsey and started at Northwestern, when I started to spend more time with small startup companies, that I got really sort of my world opened up, and I was exposed to a lot of the transformational stuff that was going on in startup land that I started to invest a serious amount of time learning and studying those.
So like in the last 10 or 20 years, you didn't see yourself in this particular place doing the work you're doing right now?
In no way, shape, or form did I ever think that I would be in this place, ever.
So what drives you to do the work that you're doing right now?
What drives me to do the work? When I worked at McKinsey, I woke up every day in support of helping my clients be successful. When I was at Northwestern, I woke up every day in support of the students being successful. Now it is in support of the entrepreneurs being successful. And I think for me, that is the thing that stitches my career together, that I do better when I'm part of a mission-oriented organization where I am working in service of somebody else's success.
So going back to that, you did, as you said, you worked at McKinsey and you went on to work as Associate Dean and then went on to become Chief Innovation Officer of Northwestern and then CEO of 1871. So why did you choose that particular route?
So I think that I'm not sure I chose much of it.
Okay.
I would say that I am that I've been extremely lucky, and that I am always open to, I'm always trying to learn new things and kind of open to new possibilities. And so I got the opportunity when I was at McKinsey to do some work for Ohio State, which is, as you pointed out earlier, my undergrad alma mater. And that work got me excited more than I expected to, that my skills were portable into the social sector. So I decided to leave and pursue a role in the social sector with higher ed. But nobody in higher ed wanted to hire me, truly. So, because it said I was an insurance partner, right? And so I got a big offer from a bank, and all my mentors told me to take that offer, but it was making me feel physically sick to take it, because that's not why I didn't leave McKinsey to go work at a bank. I left McKinsey to hopefully go work in higher ed. And so I went out to lunch to celebrate the decision of turning down the job offer. And my friend was meeting me for lunch, and she was late. And so while I was waiting for her, I picked up the newspaper, and on the cover of the paper was the 7 people to watch in Chicago in 2011. And one of those was the new dean at Kellogg at Northwestern. And as you pointed out, I'm not a grad, so I literally sent her what I call a cold call email. Like, I don't know her, and I'm not an alum. So I said, hey, McKinsey partner leaving, thinking about higher ed, would you spend a few minutes with me on the phone? And she answered my email. And that's literally, had my friend not been late, I wouldn't have read the paper. Mm-hmm. Had Sally not answered my email, none of my, I wouldn't be sitting here today had some of those things not happened. And so I think luck and staying open to possibilities plays a huge role, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. So you worked at McKinsey, you worked at Northwestern, you worked at 1871. Those are really different types of organizations. So how are they similar? How are they different, working in those types of environment?
Well, one thing I already said, which is that, in terms of my job, it's in service of somebody else being successful. So that's one thing. I think culturally, I think from a values perspective, they're all very, very similar in terms of high aspiration, in every case working with extremely talented people, team orientation. So the value set is very, very similar. The context of those organizations are very different. The size is very, very different, right? I've gone from very, big to medium to small, but the transition culturally has not been hard across them because of, I think, for the reasons I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about how you got the job at Northwestern. So how did you get into 1871?
So for about 7 years or so, I had been investing in and advising young companies, mostly in Chicago, a few outside of Chicago. And it was my passion area. And then when I became Chief Innovation Officer, it was like I got to spend a lot of time working with companies in ed tech. And so my avocation sort of married up for the first time, which was fantastic. And when the CEO job at 1871 came up, I didn't even know it had come up, but they had hired an external recruiting firm to hire the new CEO, and somebody or some number of people gave them my name. And so they called me and asked me if I would be interested in talking to them. And many of you who've been to 1871, if you were there more than a year ago, you were there with my predecessor, Howard Tillman, and Howard is a phenomenal guy, serial entrepreneur. I'm a very different background, very different leader than Howard. And so I think as we went through that process of them choosing me and me choosing them, we had to figure out, right, is the organization ready for somebody like me, which is really different than having a long-time entrepreneur at the helm. And so we sort of jointly decided that, yes, that was the right answer.
So going back to, you did say that Howard Tillman is a serial entrepreneur and you have a very different background. So what are some challenges that you've encountered having that background? What are some pros that went with that?
I think that the only challenges with respect to, so I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset. I've always built inside of organizations. And so I think any challenge I had was only in my own head. So that, there are days, and some of you, this may resonate with some of you, there are some days where there's sort of this imposter thing that shows up periodically where you're like, I'm not, where I have to physically think about like zipping into the 1871 CEO suit. But from a team, from a community perspective, I was embraced very positively from minute one. From an ability to have impact with the entrepreneurs, I don't think there was a problem because I've been trained as a problem solver and worked with a lot of young companies over time. And so I think it was more, for me, it was figuring out the pace of how 1871 is a small place, but it has a lot of complexity, and figuring out how all those pieces fit together and how we can best have impact. So there was a big learning curve, but I wouldn't say there was any particular challenge.
Mm-hmm. So you're also the first female CEO of 1871. What are some challenges that you've encountered as a first female CEO?
Again, I don't think that, I think we have to keep this in perspective. When I was named, it didn't occur to me at the time that being the first female CEO was any big deal, to be honest, because the organization was 6 years old. So it wasn't like it was a 50-year organization that, it only had one kind of leader. But the response was so positive about the fact that I was the first female CEO that I had to kind of shift my mindset on what that meant for other people. And so, again, I wouldn't call it a challenge, but I had to reframe in my head why it mattered that I was a female and what that might require of me in terms of my focus as a leader in that organization and how I should, prioritize kind of my time and effort. I think, I mentioned that we're at a record high of venture capital. There's an abundance of capital right now, but only a couple of percentage points goes to women or underrepresented minority founders. And so I think that there's a huge problem in supporting female and minority founders that we need to crack the code on. And I think because I'm in the seat that I'm in, I have the potential to at least push the dialogue on that more than I would, more than a man in my seat would be able to do.
Right. So you talked about underrepresentation of females and then underrepresented minorities. So what are some solutions for these type of problems? How can we come together and combat this problem?
So I think that these groups in general, they need four things. You need to build in a community, meaning you need to have a group of people around you that are kind of, have a similar view of the world that you do. You need sponsorship and advocacy, like true advocacy. You need positive storytelling because most of the media is about all the bad stuff associated with being one of those kinds of founders versus not. And the fourth is you need access to capital. I think 1871 does a good job on the first three, either through specialized programming for Latinx founders or female founders. I think I think the access to capital one requires more women to be in charge of capital. Mm-hmm. And so Mary Meeker, who left Kleiner Perkins, recently just launched her first fund, and she's the first female ever to launch a fund that's worth more than $1 billion, and that came out, I think, over the weekend, if not Friday. So there's consortiums called like All Raise, which has female partners at venture capital firms, mostly on the coast, that are collectively responsible for $3 or $4 billion of venture funding that are coming together to try to drive different decision making. I met with a corporate leader today who they have a venture fund inside their company, and they've only invested in men so far. And she went and asked, well, why is that? And the person who's running it said, because the men have all the best ideas. This is a company that has 500,000 employees worldwide. And she's like, excuse me, like, not sure that's the right answer. So we're talking to them about, can we curate for them, groups of female founders that can be put in front of them? And so it's a system level problem that's going to require lots of different people choosing to believe that this is an important problem to solve. I mean, from a fact base, the performance of companies that have at least one female founder and or one underrepresented minority founder perform better than those that are a straight white male founding team. Like, that's university level research fact base. But investors are still not investing against that. So like, it's literally irrational behavior. So I think, as we have more and more big exits of companies founded by minority and or women, they'll start to change.
Right. So my next question is, what are some of the biggest things that you've learned as CEO of 1871?
I've learned a lot of things. I think that, I think one is that that a huge part of my job, and I knew this going in, but it gets reinforced every day, is about working with my team, and that, the biggest part of my job probably is to make sure we've got the right people and the right jobs focused on the right things. And so how, relative to the priorities of the organization, how have I staffed the team to support those priorities, and how do we continue to kind of tinker and develop and kind of augment roles to make sure that's moving in the right place. And I probably spend, 10 to 15 hours a week on people-related things, and I spend probably a third of my time on things that are external to my organization, so talking at events like this, or meeting with groups around the city, which is not something that I've had to do in previous roles. And so figuring out how do I balance my energy on the inside of 1871 versus the outside of 1871 has been something that I've had to spend a lot of time on thinking through.
Mm-hmm. So where do you see the future of 1871 going to?
So I think we want to be known as the definitive place to build a digital business. And I won't say in Chicago. I'll just say the definitive place to build a digital business. Number one. Number two, I mentioned at the beginning that it's very important to me and my team that we support founders across the 77 neighborhoods of Chicago. So you'll see a lot more of that over the next 1 to 2 years. We'll roll that out, and hopefully by 3 years, we've had 160 female and Latinx founders go through our specialized programs. We're trying to 10x that within 3 years. So how do we reach 1,600 women and or Latinx or African American founders? So that's going to require us to go outside of 1871 to do. And then I think there's a big effort on connecting the big companies to the small and the small to the big.
Right. So veering off to another direction. So you did mention that you have an entrepreneurial mindset. With your experience as Chief Innovation Officer of Northwestern Kellogg School of Management, as well as CEO of 1871, what does innovation mean to you?
Innovation is, in my head, sort of invention, sort of a new idea plus a business model to make it real. Okay. So it's not just the idea. It's you have to. Ideas are easy. Mm-hmm. It's taking that idea and making it into something that actually adds value.
So what kind of person would succeed as entrepreneur?
So I think people that succeed are true entrepreneurs are people that have deep passion in solving problems, and that they're willing to dedicate years of their life to making something better. Many of them tend not to be great at working for other people. That they need more independence than the average person. I actually think most of the best entrepreneurs I have seen are pretty risk averse, which often people say, you love risk, but I think in reality most entrepreneurs spend their whole life de-risking things, right, and testing and learning until they get to something that is actually, far less risky than it would be otherwise. Those, I guess those would be a couple things.
So we have time for one more question. Any advice for the youth in general, to aspiring entrepreneurs, people want to make an impact?
Well, a little bit of what I said at the end. I mean, my expectations for you are extremely high because of your talent level, because of your interest in entrepreneurship, because of your orientation around problem solving and your orientation around working with a team. I think that starting point is way ahead of most people your age, and I think that given that the world has lots of big problems that need to be solved, I'm hopeful that most, if not all of you, will decide to dedicate your energies to solving some of the world's biggest problems.
All right. Thank you so much, Betsey. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you.